Right, we are allegedly live. This is going to be a bit of a different one to my last few streams, but if you've seen any of the older ones, I'm sure you'll be more familiar. So, going to minimise that window. If I get any audio leak, please tell me. This should be just me talking audible. But I am listening to her stuff in the background, just it's not coming through the stream because it's not relevant to the stream. So please add your own background music should you want to. There's many nice sort of ambient music playlists. I think the Snowstorm ones are quite good. So I have some reference material. So I've got 53 by 47 is the internal measurements. This is just another similar one. So 53 by 47. That was the wrong button. There we go. So the very, very basic. It's 3mm narrower on the insides. So this is I'm going to turn my music down a bit. Just going to realize it's going to distract me because I'm easily distracted apparently. So this is a Mermaid ballast wagon. This is one utilised by the Great Western Railway and the subsequent British Railways. It is a... I think, yeah, the ones I'm working off of were built in, I believe, 1959 by the Metropolitan Camel Works in, I want to say, London. I think Metropolitan Camel was London. Either way, they survived well into the 70s and, I want to say, 80s in regular use on the main line. And there are, from what I remember reading on a forum article before the stream, I think there's 26 preserved. So, you know, they're around. I can probably put some links to my sources in the description. However, I will need to go and find them again. So, this is a 21-foot vehicle. Just going to pull that in a bit. That's going to be 1.5. That looks about right. So, this is a 21-foot vehicle from this element at least. So, 21 foot is 147. Because it is 7mm to the foot. So, this looks somewhat wide, but that's the base of the frames. It uses 10-inch frames. So, that means this is 6mm thick. Now that on its own ain't much, but that's the template to work with. Now I just need to switch across to a different page. There we go. To get the shape of all of the gubbins that goes on the inside. That was a text message. That better not be work, because I've just started. It's work related. That's something I've got to do later. Excellent. Right, nothing I'll do now though. So, these were a somewhat unusual, or at least unconventional for the time, based on the fact that the only one I know that looks like it. They're a side-tipping ballast wagon, in that the chassis was clamped to the rails. It was then upended. That's a really awkward angle. Yeah, alright. But the thing of, because they'd be clamped to the rail on the opposite side to the direction they'd tip into, and they'd tip across onto the next track for doing, you know, parallel work, I guess. However, this, from what I gather, caused at least some problems in that you couldn't tip them all at once, and you couldn't move while tipping them, because obviously it was, you know, bolted, well, not bolted, but fixed to the rail. Does that go across the middle? I think it does, okay. So my plan is to use the mirror tool for these, so I'm just trying to make it all do one end, and I copy it down to the other. Yeah, I hope everyone is having a pleasant weekend so far. I have been not very busy, however I've been getting quite a lot on the Minecraft server, and then it crashed this morning at some point, so... now technically there should be another plate that goes there, but this is one of those awkward ones of, because this part will be visible from technically only one side but not the normal side, it's a bit more tricky. Right. So that's there. And like that. Okay, so that's the basic overlay. And I've got to work out where all these actually go, because the drawing I have does not give that much detail. Also, for anyone curious, I'm listening to Avatar's Hail the Apocalypse. Missed that. Now I could use this with other alignment options, but this is fine. Right. It's a case of lots of joining the dots up, and then I'm probably going to draw this twice in this format, because I need to draw it with the fin webbing, which will be the one side, and then I'm going to draw it with the other. And hopefully, if my regular client is interested, these will be being cast at some point. But no promises there, of course. I plan to make a couple of them, as it's somewhat of an oddity, and they are not currently available on the market, unlike one of the other ones I wanted to build, which is a turbot. A turbot is a longer bogie one that is the one with pairs of wheels at each end, well, pairs of axles at each end. That is based off of a flatbed that, although British Rail ordered quite a lot of them, the traffic they were intended for dried up rather quickly. So they had a bunch of them that were there and surplus to requirements. So they utilised them for other purposes, primarily in this case engineering vehicles. Right, let's get my reference image up again. I cannot see. Excellent. Is that asymmetrical? That looks asymmetrical. That's... There might be an extra beam. So these, however, are... I know what those are going to be. Those are all linear. So this end is braining. So it looks that, at least on the right hand end of the picture I'm looking at, which is not the end with the air cylinder, not the air cylinder, the vacuum cylinder, that there is an additional beam running across the centre, but there is not on the left hand side. So I am going to assume that it's probably... what? Is that an extra... This is the disadvantage of working with someone that is also... The picture is taken through a bush. So I've got all kinds of leaves and everything in the way. Do any of the pictures I have show anything useful on that front? No. Does the website I have pictures on have anything useful on that front? As it's quite awkward to see the frames unless it's got the top taken off. Because I really should have attached a picture, shouldn't I? That would have helped, but I didn't have anything that was conveniently, you know, usable. But if you Google Mermaid ballast wagon in Google, well, it's where else would you Google it? Then that should come up with what I've been looking at. Brain, right. So this is up to the middle of the wagon. Is there? It really looks like there's an extra bit, but I can't tell because the bush is too obscuring. No, okay. I'm just gonna put it in, and then if it's wrong, whoever, you know, wants to build it can. This is so awkward. There is literally a bush across the piece on the right side, so I can't tell if it's bush or not bush. Yeah, right. Let's bring that in there. Right. There we go. This is what a lot of my work is trying to find good references to work from. And the nature of it, normally I don't put quite so much work into the chassis unless I've got like a good reference, but this one is visible. So I have to. Missed that link there, whoops. Why are you doing this? Just gotta change just that one. Just make this lighter, right. So all these beams are going to be a thing that exists. I'm not quite sure what happened with that, but okay. And these are going to be 1.5 mil. They're going to be kind of thick, but it's to account for the fact that it's not going to have any proper detail, I guess. And these have the unusual thing of normally you have, well, very flattened U section for the ironwork. However, that's not gonna work on this one because the tipping surfaces. So it in fact has L section, which is unusual in the things I have seen of this. So yeah, bit of an oddity if nothing else. So there is reinforcing plates that actually go on the inside edge, so it's sort of like a very, very flattened Z shape, if that makes sense. Now, there is normally important measurement that I need to use in this area. And I can't remember what it is at the top of my head, but I have a book that I normally use for referencing on this, because generally, if the cover doesn't slide off while I'm trying to pick it up. It has enough of the detail. As again, this one has visible chassis members, so it's quite useful. 2 feet. That seems about right. Is that about right? Let me just... where's my reference again? Yeah, my reference only has a side view, it doesn't have a top-down view. Actually, that looks kind of narrow. I'm going to say that's probably 18 inches and not 2 feet. So that means that is... I'm going to round it down very slightly. 10. Right. Now, these lines look very thick, so let's make them the correct... right, now I can't see because there's all the other gubbins goes on top. Now again, I refer to my reference book because these were a Great Western Railway design, and I have a Great Western Railway design book, which is the, for those curious, a history of GWR goods wagons, new edition combining parts 1 and 2 by A.G. Atkins, Beard, Hyde and Tourette. Which is a very, very useful book. But I should look at getting the 3rd edition to make things a little easier for myself. Braining. Right. Is it chapter 5? No, it's not chapter 5, it's somewhere in chapter 3 or 4. Sorry about this. There's nothing for you to see on this, I'm afraid, as I am looking through a physical book. I'm going to look at this, and I'm either going to not be helped by it, or it will be painfully obvious and I'll feel bad that I didn't remember in the first place. One of the two. There's an illustration in the corner of a page on the construction of wagon frames. Introduction to freight working, telegraph code names. It's not going to be in that. Construction of wagons. There we go. Right. It runs not actually fully into the corner, which actually makes sense. Okay. See, on the picture I've got, it's really not obvious that that's the case. So, but it is the case, apparently. So this is the outside dimension, which means this needs to be 38. And of course, it's broken. Come on, select. No, don't. There. Now this has to... It really doesn't seem correct, but... What can you do? So this has to be 38mm because it has to fit around several other components. Now, 72. Now this has the relative convenience that the ironwork on the frames. 95 is one of those pictures at York. Alright, they lasted a bit longer than I thought. Oh yeah, another one at York in 95. So 70s and 80s was wrong, it was in fact the 90s. I think the 70s and 80s was the non-fitted ones. That is those with only manual brakes and no automatic train braking, where the locomotive controls the brakes. Lots of nice pictures. I'm currently on Paul Bartlett's website, just looking at it for the reference material. Some of these vehicles in the past, I've either had models of them made by in smaller scales, or occasionally I've managed to find more drawings, but I kind of just did this as a, you know what I feel like doing today type thing. So I'm going to assume that that's... I remember. Okay, this one's going to be trickier, because it does in fact go all the way to the corners, because this is one of the self-contained. Why aren't... Right. Summit's broken there. Alright, let's undo a couple of steps and see if that fixes it. Right. So because I'm being forgetful, this has, from the design get-go, self-contained buffers. So there is no need for it to have the recess behind the headstock, which is this plate here, as opposed to the soul bar, which is the one that runs sideways. It would have no need for these pieces because it just, you know, there's not a bar running out the back of the headstock because it's self-contained. So that means they can go all the way up to the corner, which in theory makes it stronger in terms of rigidity, if nothing else. Right. I've selected all of these parts to make them the same. Apparently I didn't. Now, I'm under the impression, based on how that goes, that these bars go underneath the adjacent frame, which implies, at least, that that is a flat connection there. Okay, what we do in software, this is not a thing that I required from you. Right, now that these two are locked together, this might stop messing me about so much. So... nearly messed up there. It's not so hot a day today, which is nice. Don't know how it is where other people are. Now, this piece of the frame appears to sit... So that's middle bar, brake cylinder, bar. So that sits... Why are these not constrained? These are meant to be constrained. Right. Right, those are now constrained. So that should be one side of the axle. The axle one goes there. The other one, a second bar. This is really awkward to see how it fits together because the picture I have is unhelpful. Let's have a look at Google. Right. It is a... what did I say this was? It is a ZJV, which is the vacuum version. V... Mermaid... ballast. Let's see what that comes up with. Right. there's images. Let's have a look at variations on a theme of not the bodywork. Well, there's plenty of pictures of other stuff I've made. Not ones I made, admittedly, but... what's that one? That's engage. Okay, that's not as helpful. Let's try frames. No? Alright then. There's a Kartik. That's nice. I need to make another Kartik sometime, or rather rebuild heavily the one I have at the moment. Well, that's inconvenient. So it appears to have... Why is this so inconveniently done? I can't tell if that's... This is really awkward picture. So it appears... So I can't tell if there's an extra chassis bar that runs across this side. Because it looks like there might be. But it also looks like it might not be. And the other end is not helpful because there is a bush obscuring it along with the rails that the hopper sits on. Well, not a hopper, it's not got a hole in the bottom. The bodywork. Okay, let's do the other trick of let's look at the body side and see where the rivets go. Any substantial amounts of rivets normally indicate where the frames join. That might be one. That's actually a very nice picture. There is very much not anything helping here. Right, let's try and have another look at this. Right. Let's actually have another look on the Seven Valleys website, because they did have some pictures. Oh, actually, they have some pictures of the underneath. Now, it's just got to work out which bits of the underneath it is. Yeah, working out which bit it is the tricky part. Okay, so, things I have said that were wrong. This bit. That means that is in fact not. That is in fact that. Right, that's quite narrow, so yeah, 10 mil. Might not even be 10 mil actually. Yeah, that looks like a foot. So that's a foot between those channels. Means that's even steeper. Now, one thing I probably should check before I get too much further, just for my inconvenience, it's 12-foot wheelbase. So I need to have a rectangle with 6 foot marked out, and 6 times 5 is, well, 6 times 7 is 42. So that indicates where the axle things are. So it seems that the chassis and the soul bars and all the other bits kind of just overlap in lots of places, which is quite unhelpful, I'm not gonna lie. However, this picture from the Severn Valley Railway is very useful, and I believe they are open again as of yesterday. So if you're in the area of Shropshire or nearby, I can definitely recommend going and visiting them, as I would like to myself. So this is a plate that is bolted, well, riveted over the frames. That's not helpful. Blah blah blah. That's somewhat unhelpful. It's one of those things where it shows a bit of the detail, but because it's such a small scale, a bunch of it's missing for practicalities. Which is, you know, tiresome. Oh yeah, that's been shopped about a lot. Right. Try not to forget about your chat, I'm just somewhat preoccupied, I guess. So, the frames do appear to go like that. So that bar is not that far away. And then that's the middle. However, there is then another bar that sits all the way across that, which is one of the, I want to say, yokes for the tub. Because there is, let me just turn this around. So the tub sits proud on top on a couple of basically arches, and then it can get tipped along those arches to dispense ballast to one side or the other. That might have been helpful to describe earlier. So, that appears to sit above that line, which is, if I'm remembering correctly, let's just wagons, shark, coded parts, WIN, the type 2. This is for a 12-inch one, but it's still the same principle. It is a 5mm gap, and this appears to sit above that element. So that appears to be, because normally people are very helpful in this regard and work in nice solid units. So the center of this beam needs to be 5 feet away from the center, so this will be 35.75. Braining, right. And the next one is quite close. Is it quite close? This is one that was tricky because it looks asymmetrical, but I'm sure I will work it out. Braining. Right, it is wider than the spring is long. And the springs are... I don't have one to hand. Well, I probably do, but it's in the pile of stuff on my desk. Let's have a quick look through, see if I've got any springs to hand. Not any the right size. Sorry, I have a small parts, like, tub question on my desk. So, axle block spring is 12 mil. So it sits outside of that, which probably implies that there is again 7 millimeters between these two elements. Which implies... So this needs to be 0.75 thick. This line is 26.5, which is 4 foot with, well, half. And this appears to go in the centre of that, so 14, right. So to me at least, that is mostly correct. That looks weird though still. But that is covered over on the eventual... Well, actually that sits above the spring, and the springs are 12 millimeters wide. Or at least my ones are, but yeah, it does sit there. Alright, that's a little... Might make more sense if I had it the same away. There we go. Near enough. So as far as the only thing that should be failing it is... There we go. Now, this can be fairly substantial as it is for casting purposes. Just going to close out those two. There we go. That looks about right. Now, again, this is being cast, so some things need adjusting. For example, these ends need scooping out. I'm going to use again the mirror function, so we go make it like that thick. Six and a half. And 6 total tall. Through all. There we go. I need to put the headstocks back on and then put the holes through it for all the gubbins. And again, this looks very wrong, but how many feet wide is this? This should be well, it's 56 wide, which is 6 foot? No. 42 is that, and it's 47, 50, yeah. 7.5 foot. And that is approximately 1, 2, 3, 4. It's approximately a fifth of the thickness, so a fifth of. Why am I being so slow today? 53. 53 is 6.5? No. 7.5 foot. So 7.5 divided by 5 is 2.5. No, it isn't. Why am I being so slow? Right. 2.5 for each of those. So when I was like, oh, this should be smaller. No, that should be about that much. Oh, no. So that can be 6.25. That looks a little more proportional. Now this also has the other problem of the prototype and the models I can make are not necessarily very overlapping all the time. So some things will need adjusting. For example, I'm going to need to make notches in the frames that I'm drawing to let the wheels fit, otherwise they won't. Which is more of a problem than, you know, you might expect, I guess. So this has a radius on it, but because the radius has to run all the way across, I can't do it in post. So this is the easiest way to do it. Most convenient, if not easiest. Alright, now again, this is going to be cast, so it needs to have certain easings. Then may have to adjust bits later, make extra parts. Well, not make extra parts, but make certain parts different. Might try stream some Borderlands of Ash later if she's about, and if I'm feeling up to it. As we are currently just about started the Tiny Tina DLC mission. I believe it's the Dragon's Keep one, if I'm remembering correctly. So the headstock is probably 3mm. This isn't, well, this could be much thinner, however, practicalities. Again, because casting, it's got to be slightly overscaled in some areas, so 6'6" on the journals, and I should be faster at this maths by now. because that's the thing, there are also some inconsistencies that are the result of how I have to build it. Because the what's it called? Because the wheels I buy are a certain size, I can't necessarily. So this should be just shy of 7 feet wide on this part. So if I make that 7 foot is 49. See, it doesn't actually go all the way across. But I can't make it any narrower because then the axles would stick out way too far. So I have to make it slightly over wide to compensate for this. Which is how I get the 53 number. Why is... certain measurements it does not like. So 0.9 update. There we go. And this is generally some degree of slightly complex metalwork that goes together to make that bit. I think that actually needs to be thinner. Let's go with 0.7, as this is only for the ends and that bit across the top. And again, some of these bits can get chopped out later. So, next thing to do is... Well, this part's almost done. Apart from the notches that go underneath. Braining. So it's only got to be a very small distance, but it's still substantial enough at the outset. But it is better to put them in from the start than in post. So... one of the loud people driving past. So it's got a 12-foot wheelbase. So if I allow 7 mil either side, that's 10 mils. That means this has to be 70. And it is a 32 millimeter, which, giving it a bit of slack, is 28. So as you can see, it doesn't really affect it too badly, actually. So if I went with the full wheel diameter and take off the wheel diameter off of the things, I believe it's 11 millimeters is the radius of the tyre. The flange is obviously slightly wider, so the like rim that sticks out and holds it on the track. So that means that if it's, let's say it's 24, that means I've got to take 24 off of that, so that's 90. No, it isn't. It's 70. Well, it's 84 minus 24, which is 60. Which now is more obvious that it sticks into these these 4 members there. So if I make this 4 millimeters thick, that should be more than enough. And go 2 millimeters. You got plenty of space, and it's not too obvious, as there'll be other stuff covering over the top. Just going to radius these as well, as they don't need to be so harsh. Only 1mm, as they still need to be functional. And it beats what I did on one of them, which was literally just get a pair of side cutters and cut some of the frames out. Because this is a thing I have to consider, is that the prototype, the wheel flange is maybe an inch at most on a tapered wheel. So, yeah, that's not such a problem. But on the models, the taper is more noticeable. Also, I forgot to... not that button. Mirror. Pad number 2. Yep. There we go. And now I need to do these bits again. So yeah, it doesn't like you doing some steps out of order. Gonna have to do that again, but I only have to reassign it because, again, this software is a little clunky, but it is free. And I gather the new version of it is coming out, well, it's in beta testing at the moment. I'm just, I don't want to upgrade a bunch of stuff to the beta copy until I know it's going to work, because you can't backdate work, you can only redo it or save multiple copies. So if it suddenly has an error, then I'd rather not have to deal with that. So, this is getting there quite nicely, hopefully. The drawing I have is very, very light on the detail for this element. Some things this is going to be very difficult to cast, like this corner piece. That almost certainly end up with the end of the frames getting chopped off. But that'll be something I'll discuss with the person when it comes to casting. As if this is put into a train and it needs to have a lot of draw weight, there'll probably be a piece of brass set into the lower end of the frames, which will present its own problems, but I can deal with that when it happens. Another thing I have to deal with is fitting the W irons, because normally I make these with the, well, you saw it earlier, it's not quite a W iron, because the old ones used to have a cutout here. I've got some of those saved somewhere else, but this type, this actually should have holes in it as well for this type, but this fits on here, but obviously the wheels, the centre of which is there-ish, it's not going to fit. So that'll be something I'll deal with when it comes to that section. So that's about as much detail as I can get from that section. However, I could put all the top plating on. Raining. Right, so there are rather metal plates that sit on top of the frames and go to add some strength, because obviously there's not as much strength on this top surface, so you add another piece on the top to make it stronger. So that is, from what I can tell, a rectangular section that just sits from there to there. There's one that sits on there, and one that sits on there. Same at the other end, but I'm only going to draw one set and mirror it, because that in theory makes it easier. Right, delete that line and just replace it with those. Okay, and then this bit can go like that. verticule. Right, these on top of the frame, they're also going to get recessed very slightly into it. So these need to be slightly more well placed than just on top. So 72.5, and these appear at least to run all the way up to at least the first bulkhead. Actually, no, they run only as far as there. It's technically the same, but it's the detail, I guess. So this sits just on top of this bar, so that's 24.5. That side is mirrored by the restraints on it. So as long as I've got these set correctly, I think that goes all the way along that. I'm going to say it does. Let's... 17.25. There we go. And this goes to there. Which means this should be 37. That'll do. Okay, now this piece is the one that goes over the back of the buffers. Not over the back of the buffer, over the back of the coupling, as the buffer one's already covered. However, though, the buffers are the self-contained type, fitted to both wands, so it doesn't really matter strictly. This sits both sides of the frame. I'm still trying to work out if it's just foreshortening or not, but that looks like it should be longer. Or that actually looks like it should be narrower. Tell you what, let's make this 7 and make that 10.5. Because I reckon I can make that a little bit there, a little bit narrower. Instead of 6.25, let's make it 10.5 across the whole thing, so that would be 5.25. It's only a millimetre narrower, but it might have a substantial effect. That looks a little tidier, actually. Okay, 6.75, and Hail the Apocalypse is finished. Black waltz, why not? So, these plates, yeah, not that thick. 0.5 up, and to give it some more strength, 0.5 down. Which is technically not, you know... Sorry about that. Technically not necessary, but should help. Now mirror this again to the other end. There we go. So, next up, all the gubbins that goes on the ends of this. As there's quite a bit of it, and it's all fixed, for want of a better word. However, only one bit actually needs to be on here, and that is the coupling boss, as the restraining hooks, which are chained to the doors, and the frame are going to be their own separate pieces because they won't cast, as will the lamp iron, as will the buffers, as will the brake hoses. So the only thing I need to add is the coupling boss. So I'm going to do very simply, and I'm going to make the holes for it when I do the holes for the buffers, because although this is technically a vehicle that has self-contained buffers, technically I can do self-contained buffers, but for convenience for everyone involved, I do them with the option to have tails that sit through the headstock. Makes it much easier. Now I need to open a reference image, so there we go. When it gets there. So I need to get the geometry for this bit. No, that's not the right one. Right. That's obviously not the right one. Come on, me. Get better. That's the rivets along the sides. That's the things for the footsteps. I really should label what these parts do. No, that's the... Okay, I'm in the right area though. Getting close. Getting closer. Okay, is a 1.2 by 2.2. That's the important measurements. 1.2 by 2.2. It's got a vaguely rectangular one of these. Which looks to be three and a half. Only two up. 2.5? Yeah, looks about right. Right. It is... Now, I think I can just copy that to the other end. Why not? No, I can't copy that bit because it's on the end. Right. Put this to wireframe so I can just copy it. So yeah, slowly getting there. The intention is I'm going to draw for an amount of time until I get bored or until something more urgently demanding of my time comes up. And I'll see how I get on. The more interesting part of this should be during the hopper. Well, I said the hopper, the body. But the body is relatively simple by comparison. I made this 0.6mm thick plate because that is marginally thicker than the normal ones. It is also a welded plate, at least by appearance, so no rivets on there. Good times. Now the ends. So I said 1.2 by 2.2. So 2.2. Not that button. 1.2. This makes it a fairly tight fit sometimes, although my printer has a habit of sometimes drifting off on that one. So this should be 1.4. The buffers are centered on the height of the vehicle, so that's nice and easy. They should be 40mm apart, which as you can see is getting quite close to that bit, but not much can be done for that. They're also, so if I put onto wireframe, that's going to slightly clip through that beam, but that's somewhat unavoidable. Now let me just flip that round so you can just see it just grazes it, but again, practicalities of space and function. Now I could be like this and go through all, but that's going to look awful on this one, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see if I can mirror this one though. Horizontal axis? Nope. And put it into wireframe again, just for quickness. Sunday today, the 2nd of August. As I said earlier, there should be a bunch of the preserved railways and various historical museums, excuse me, and what have you, open again, which will hopefully mean that there'll be nice amounts of pictures of them. 0.6, 1.2, 1.2, there we go. 2.2, 1.4, so there's a lot of stuff that fits on the end here because you've got the, well, brain, there we go. So you've got buffers on these. Then you've got the lamp iron, brake hose, restraint. The right side's actually fairly empty. So those are 2mm thick bosses in overallness, which hopefully means there'll be a decent level of compression on the coupling hooks, as the ones on my van use the dapple couplings. Well, to be fair, I've got one of each. I've got one with screw links, which are my dapple couplings, and I've got one with the instantas, which are the Pico ones. And the Instanta has a much shorter, like, tail on the coupling thing to put the spring over, which makes it more compact, but also makes it quite awkward to fit into, you know, that little pocket. But yeah, I can tell you now that this part is going to have to get cut off for the cast version. It's just not going to work, because this little bit here and the fact that there is a pocket at the end means it won't come out of the mould. So that'll be a bridge I'll cross when I get to it. But other than that, also this is going to be able to be printed flat, which is very pleasant. So I can start putting some of the other bits on, except I can't, because all the yokes sit below the chassis height. So the only other things I could add are rivets, and I'm not going to do rivets right now. So let me just go File, Save As, the Mermaid. So this is part 701, X1, Mermaid chassis. This is by no means completed, but it's at least in the file box, I guess. There you go. Looks a bit odd with the line down the middle, but it'll be fine. So, now in theory, I could make this much more delicate by adding in all the metal details onto the body shell, like hollow these sections out, but they're not very visible, and in doing so it will weaken it and make it harder to cast. So a bit of clumsiness shouldn't be an issue. Now the next piece is nice and easy. There we go. I've missed every single constraint with this, as you may have noticed if you are sharp of eye or brain. Well, that looks terrible. Excellent, right. The interior is pretty much entirely smooth, as is the nature of the convenience. So it has 21 foot 3 inches of space inside. This will come up shortly. The side walls are 1.9 inches deep. However, it is more than that because the body itself has its own subframe, which actually makes this quite a heavy vehicle. It's 10 tons, 1900 weight on its own, without anything in it. So it'd be 24 tons, 1900 weight, fully loaded, which isn't an insubstantial amount for a small vehicle. I mean, it's not 40 or 50 tons in my other ones, but yeah, it's noticeable. Also, that is sitting on what appears to be 1 foot channel. So it's 5'4" from there to there. So in theory, I could work out the gap as well, but I'm going to say for convenience, that's a foot thick. So it is 7'9" inside the doors. 7'9" is... Maths I should be able to do quicker than this. 7 foot is 49. And it's 49 plus about 5. So 54. Now, this is one of those bits where I've got maths to do. So, the fun maths is I have various numbers. So I have the ground, I have the top of the frames, and I have there. So that's 3 foot 10 and a quarter, which is, at least by my maths, 27. But I've also got 5'4", which I'm going to say is near as damn it 5'4" is 35 plus nearly 6 inches, so 35, 38, but I'm going to say 37 to allow thickness for the floor. And then it is 8 foot 1 inch total height, which means this to here is 8 foot and an inch. 8 foot is 56. Let's say 57. So I hope that made some sense as to how. Oh yeah, and this is 1 foot 9 inches, isn't it? And 1 foot 9 inches is basically 7 and 5, which is 12. And that is about as good as that's going to get. Except it's not 12, it's 13. I do actually have a... While it's doing that, I'm going to open up my Excel document that has all the relevant numbers, and we'll check. So I said 1 foot 9 inches. 1 foot 9 inches is 12.26. So near enough, yeah. And then I said 8 foot 1 1/4, 8 foot. Come on. 8 foot 1.25 is 56.78. So rounding up that is 57. So I'm not making all of it up. Just quite a lot. So this is 21 foot 3 in the clear. And then it's got all the space for the mechanisms that go over the outside. But 21 foot 3 in the clear is, according to this, 149. So 149 in the clear with a millimetre thick end wall is 151. Let's make that 151 in each direction. Well, not in each direction, but... So, 75.5. 75.5. I kind of hope that would go, you know, in the other direction, but apparently it went vertical. Never mind, right. So I said 151, so that'd be 149 in the clear. A mill up. And then not quite 3 foot tall. There we go. The very exciting plank. Alright. So, let's refer to my reference images once again. Has a welded floor, or at least a plated floor that probably has been welded at some point. Not actually sure what ownership that would even be in, because that's a new picture. That's just 14 tons, so that's presumably had the vacuum equipment removed, which is a lot of the weight. Just means that's either air fitted or unfitted. Either way, so there's gubbins that goes on the end, and it has an underframe that goes underneath. And the underframe is quite simple. So yeah, a lot of this might have to get reworked for the finalised version, but for my purposes I can make it like this. And it looks awful right now, but that's hopefully going to change shortly. Ooh, eating an entire lasagna is starting to catch up with me, it seems. I am flagging. Braining these components, right. So, don't want to over constrain it, so I'm just going to select those, right. Work on one side at a time. Braining, right. These parts actually stick out over the outside. But I'm just going to make the backs thicker. Again, I'm going to use 0.8mm thick. And probably 3mm, so that will be 3mm, but it'll be 1.5 and 0.5. Probably going to have to answer that message soon. Right, I said these were 1 foot channel for convenience. Uh, 26. Why is it? Right, there we go. Okay, now these run full length, so 151. So they're slightly heavier than they need to be, but just to give it more stiffness, as there is nothing to this. Now there is presumably, again, I will flick through my reference pictures. I think there's one that shows the underside. That's a lot of messages. Was there a view of the underneath? Because it seems that the majority of the strength is made up by those beams down the outside. And yeah, there are no longitudinal beams, there is just... Is it longitudinal? There's side to side ones, not end to end ones. So there's at least one each end. There's almost certainly one down the middle, but I'll check. There's one there and there. Right. Can't tell which bit that is. There are, in fact, many beams running down the underside. And I can tell you where they'll be based on reference pictures. There's the good ones. There we go. So there is. Is that? Right, so there's 5 floor panels, which means there needs to be 6 beams holding them up, because that makes, you know, good sense. Now this is a bit that's always fun to do, because the lines do like to overlap in the wrong directions. Brain. Right. Once I've got these lines sorted, I'll have to check if that's an important message. Braining. Alright, so 75.5. $26. 52. Now, these should be equally spaced. Right, now if I make these a mil thick, that's all I need to be. Now that would be the make sense option, but I don't think the outside end is actually quite as convenient as it could be. So, braining, get there eventually. 12 foot, and that is also the centre of these. So, there to there is 12 foot is 84. Now, you can just see that that's flipped itself over. Getting a lot of messages. That's... Now, if I make it off the inside, that'll be easier. So 83. Right, that seems correct. So it's slightly longer at the ends, but otherwise is... That's a lot of notifications. There we go. Now I just need to correct that, obviously, because I've got a intentional gap so I could check the ends were. Right. So that is the bodywork, sans the doors. And I'll be back in just a second. Five new messages. Doop-a-doo. So I had someone move out earlier, and I'm now getting all the questions about the details I sent about it. Right, hopefully that'll leave me alone for a little bit longer. Right, bodywork. Bodywork, right. Frames. Right. Exports. Let's go with 701 X1 Mermaid chassis. Right, this isn't going to be the actual final version, obviously, but it's for my own convenience. Save as 702 Mermaid body. Now, Kura should be on my list of visible sources when it loads. Wait for Kura to load, and I can try and give you a vague impression at least of what it's meant to look like. Right. General, don't drop models to bed. Right. Wagons, Mermaid, open both of them. Alright, it's done that. Didn't help that both softwares have different internal scrolling options, so that's centered. Let's get this one also centered. Then we'll pick this one up by 13 millimeters. Right. So obviously there's a few bits missing, but that's the sort of general arrangement. The yokes fit between them, and then it rolls over like so. It sort of tips along the yoke to tip stuff out sideways. Fairly simple, although a bit convoluted compared to other systems. However, it does mean that you can tip out 14 tons without, the use of shovels, which would take you a little while. and would involve you having to clamber up into the vehicle, stand on top of it, and then shovel it all out by hand. So it is an improvement over, say, for example, the Grampus, which is a similar tonnage vehicle. So it's going to be a big one to print, because that's the size of the printer bed. It should have replied later, but brain, right. So next up, I reckon I'll have a go at the doors. Although actually no, I should finish the body, as there's not much left to do on it. It's got... The awkward thing of it has U channels on the ends, so they're difficult. Oh, excuse me. Braining, right. Now, there's no measurements that I haven't already used on this drawing now, so that's unhelpful. Also, according to this, of this variant that I'm drawing, which is the slightly later variant, there was 550 built, so that's not terrible. So, oh, excuse me. Right, I'm suddenly very lightheaded, so I'm afraid, chat, that I'm going to have to call it there. I hope you've enjoyed this piece of progress, and that you all have a lovely day. Have a nice day. Bye.